Sometimes justice requires patience, and sometimes it requires walking down the aisle in a white dress, standing at the altar with the man who destroyed your life, and waiting until the entire town is watching before you tear his world apart. This is the story of Kate Brennan and Daniel Garrett, a wedding that never happened, a revenge plot 5 years in the making, and the moment when a woman who'd lost everything finally took it all back. Daniel Garrett thought he was marrying a quiet widow who'd be grateful for his wealth and protection. What he didn't know was that Kate had spent 3 months gaining his trust, learning his secrets, and gathering evidence that would send him to prison for the rest of his life. And she'd waited until his wedding day, in front of everyone he'd ever impressed, bribed, or controlled, to make her move. This is a story of what happens when a woman stops running from the past and walks straight into it wearing a wedding dress and carrying a federal warrant. Let's go back to Lander, Wyoming Territory, 1883, to a church where a wedding was about to become a trial.
3 months earlier, Kate Brennan had stepped off the stage in Lander with one trunk, $40, and a plan that would either get her justice or get her killed. The town hadn't changed much. Same dusty streets, same wooden buildings, same mountains rising in the distance. But everything else was different, because 5 years ago, this town had belonged to homesteaders and ranchers trying to make something from nothing. Now it belonged to Daniel Garrett. His name was on the bank, the hotel, the largest ranch, the cattle yards, half the storefronts. He'd bought it all, one piece at a time, over 5 years, with money that should have gone to the families he'd driven out, including hers. Kate had checked into the boarding house under a false name, Sarah Miller, widow, originally from Ohio, looking to start over after losing her husband to illness. The landlady, a plump woman named Mrs. Henderson who loved gossip more than money, had believed every word. Why wouldn't she? Kate had practiced the story for months, perfected the sad smile, the way her voice caught when she mentioned her late husband, the small details that made lies feel true. A locket she wore with a stranger's photograph inside, a mourning dress that was exactly the right amount of worn. Letters she carried from friends back east that were actually written by herself in different handwriting, every detail planned, every lie prepared. She'd spent the first week observing, watching, learning the rhythms of the town. Daniel Garrett rode through every afternoon at 3 o'clock, checking his properties, speaking with his foreman, making sure everyone knew who was in charge. He was 52 now, graying at the temples but still handsome in the way powerful men often were. Confident, well-dressed, the kind of man who shook hands with judges and senators and territorial governors, who spoke softly but expected to be obeyed. Kate had watched him from the boarding house window, her hands clenched, her jaw tight, remembering. 5 years ago, Daniel Garrett had been a land speculator. Not the richest man in town. Not yet. Just a man with ambition and a willingness to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. Kate's husband, Thomas Brennan, had owned 800 acres of prime grazing land along the Green River. Good water, good grass, perfect for cattle, the kind of land men killed for. Daniel had wanted it. He'd made an offer, $500. Thomas had refused. The land had been in his family for 20 years, wasn't for sale. Daniel had made a second offer, $700. Thomas had refused again, not angry, just firm. The land was his legacy, what he'd leave to his children someday. Daniel had smiled, shook Thomas's hand, said he understood, and 2 weeks later, Thomas Brennan was dead. Shot twice on the road to Cheyenne. Robbed, the sheriff said, probably drifters. Bad luck, no witnesses, no suspects. Case closed within a week. And 6 months after that, Daniel Garrett acquired the Brennan property through a quiet bank auction when the widow couldn't make the loan payments without her husband's income. Legal, clean, perfect, Kate had fought it, hired a lawyer with money she didn't have, demanded an investigation, filed complaints with the territorial marshal. But Daniel had judges in his pocket, sheriffs on his payroll, land office clerks who filed whatever papers he told them to file. She'd lost everything: the land, the house, the future she and Thomas had planned. And when her lawyer suggested, quietly, over whiskey in his office, that she should leave town before she had an accident too, she'd understood. Daniel Garrett was untouchable, in Wyoming Territory at least. So she'd run, taken what little money remained, left in the night, and spent 5 years moving from territory to territory, working as a seamstress in Colorado, a hotel maid in Montana, a cook in Utah, saving every dollar, learning to shoot, learning to fight, learning patience, and planning. Always planning, because running wasn't the same as giving up. It was just the first move in a very long game. The accidental meeting happened in the second week. Kate had been walking past the bank, timing it precisely, watching from across the street until Daniel emerged, when she stepped directly into his path. Her parcels slipped from her arms, paper packages scattered across the boardwalk. "Oh, I'm so sorry. No, my fault entirely." Daniel had bent immediately to help her. A gentleman, always the gentleman. Their eyes had met, and for just a second, just a fraction of a second, Kate had wondered if he'd recognize her. 5 years was a long time. She'd been 21 then, 26 now. Her face had changed, lost the softness of youth, gained hard angles. Her body had changed too, thinner, stronger, shaped by labor and grief. But her eyes were the same, and Thomas had always said she had her mother's eyes, distinctive, memorable. Daniel looked into them and saw nothing but a stranger. "You're new in town," he'd said, smiling. "Yes, sir. Just arrived from Ohio. Business or pleasure?" "Neither, I'm afraid. I'm a widow, starting over." His expression had softened immediately. Sympathetic. Perfect. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. It's been 2 years, but..." She'd let her voice trail off, let the sadness show. It wasn't hard. The grief was real, just aimed at a different loss. "Well," Daniel had said, gathering the last of her packages, "this is a good town for new beginnings. We take care of our own here." He'd handed her the parcels, extended his hand. Daniel Garrett. Kate had taken it, felt his warm, soft palm against hers, the hand that had signed the order for her husband's death. "Sarah Miller," she'd said, her voice steady, her grip firm. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Garrett." "The pleasure is mine, Miss Miller." He'd tipped his hat, walked away, and Kate had stood there on the boardwalk, packages clutched to her chest, heart pounding so hard she could hear it. Phase 1 complete. The courtship had been his idea. At least, he'd thought it was. But Kate had orchestrated every moment. She'd started attending church, knowing he attended, sitting 3 rows behind him, singing the hymns, nodding politely when he'd turned to greet parishioners. She'd shopped at the general store at exactly 3:15 every Tuesday and Thursday, because Daniel stopped there at 3:30. Routine. Predictable. She'd joined the Ladies' Improvement Society because Daniel's housekeeper was a member, and housekeepers knew everything. Within 2 weeks, Daniel was appearing wherever she was. By the 3rd week, he was carrying her packages. By the 4th, he was inviting her to dinner. By the 6th, he was introducing her to the town's elite, the judge, the banker, the territorial representative, all of them charmed by the quiet widow who listened more than she spoke, who asked thoughtful questions, who made Daniel look generous and protective and kind. By the 8th week, he'd proposed. They'd been sitting on the hotel porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "Sarah," he'd said carefully, "I know this might seem sudden. We've only known each other 2 months, but I've come to care for you deeply, and at my age I've learned not to waste time when something feels right." He'd taken her hand. "I'd be honored if you'd consider becoming my wife." Kate had looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd ordered Thomas's murder, who'd stolen her land, who'd built an empire on graves, who sat here now, holding her hand, believing she was grateful for his attention, believing she'd say yes because women like Sarah Miller always said yes to men like him, because they had no choice, no power, no options, and she'd smiled. The same smile she'd practiced in mirrors for months, soft, grateful, loving. "Yes," she'd said, "I would be honored to be your wife." He'd kissed her hand, and Kate had felt nothing but cold, patient rage. The next 2 months had been the hardest of her life, harder than losing Thomas, harder than losing the land, harder than 5 years of running and hiding and planning, because she had to touch him, hold his hand across dinner tables, let him kiss her cheek good night, sit beside him in church, smile while he introduced her as his fiancée, plan a wedding she had no intention of completing, but it gave her access to his home, his office, his files, his secrets. She'd started carefully, asking to see the house where they'd live, walking through rooms, noting where he kept his keys, which doors stayed locked, which windows faced the street. Then she'd asked about his business. "I want to understand what you do," she'd said sweetly. A wife should know her husband's work. He'd been pleased, proud, showed her his office, his ledgers, his maps showing property acquisitions. "All of this," he'd had, gesturing broadly, "will be yours someday, ours, our children's." Kate had smiled and nodded and memorized everything, the location of his safe, the filing cabinet where he kept deeds, the desk drawer that stayed locked. She'd started searching at night. He'd given her a key to the house. "So you can come and go," he'd said. "Start making it yours." She'd thanked him, kissed his cheek, and used that key to enter his office at 2 a.m. when he was asleep upstairs. The desk drawer had been easy, a hairpin and patience. Inside, letters, dozens of them, correspondence with sheriffs, land agents, railroad executives, and, buried in the middle, a letter from a man named Cobb. "The Brennan matter is handled as discussed. No complications, no witnesses. Payment expected per our agreement. $2,500 as agreed." Kate's hands had shaken when she'd read it, not from fear, from vindication. She'd been right. Thomas hadn't been killed by drifters. He'd been murdered, on Daniel's orders, for refusing to sell land. She'd copied the letter, word for word. In the dim light of a shielded candle, her handwriting careful, precise. Then she'd put the original back exactly where she'd found it, relocked the drawer, and kept searching. Over the next month, she'd found 17 more pieces of evidence, forged deeds, where signatures didn't match the original owners, payments to sheriffs marked consultation fees that coincided with homesteaders leaving town suddenly, land transfers that happened within weeks of mysterious deaths, A pattern, clear, undeniable. Daniel Garrett had been clearing homesteaders for a decade. Thomas was just one of many. She documented everything, copied every page, every ledger entry, every incriminating letter, and she'd sent it all to a federal judge in Denver, someone outside Wyoming Territory, outside Daniel's reach. The judge had written back within 2 weeks. Evidence is compelling. Federal warrant approved. We'll send marshals upon your signal. Suggest public setting to avoid violence. Maximum witnesses. Kate had read that letter 3 times, then burned it, and chosen her moment. The wedding, public, witnessed, perfect. Back to the church. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Daniel grabbed her wrist, hard, his fingers digging in. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Kate didn't flinch. "What I should have done 5 years ago." She pulled free, turned to the congregation, 200 faces staring, shocked, confused, waiting. This man had my husband, Thomas Brennan, murdered so he could steal our land. I have proof, letters, payments, forged documents, all of it submitted to federal court 3 weeks ago. Daniel's face went white, then red. "You're insane." "Am I?" She held up the warrant. Federal Judge Morrison in Denver didn't think so. Neither did the U.S. Marshal's Office. Daniel's eyes darted to the congregation, searching for allies for the sheriff he'd bought, for the judge who owed him favors. But they weren't moving, just watching, because federal law trumped local arrangements. "This is slander," Daniel said, his voice rising. "I'll sue you for every dollar I don't have," Kate interrupted. "Go ahead, but you'll be doing it from prison." The church doors opened. 3 men walked in, U.S. Marshals, badges gleaming on their vests, guns holstered but visible. The lead marshal, a tall, lean man with a gray mustache, stopped at the altar. "Daniel Garrett?" Daniel's jaw worked, his hands opening and closing. "This is a mistake. I don't know what this woman has told you, but—" "Daniel Garrett?" the marshal repeated. "I'm U.S. Marshal Thomas Wade. You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and illegal acquisition of federal land." He pulled handcuffs from his belt. "Turn around, please." "I will not. I have rights. I demand to speak with my lawyer." "You'll have that opportunity after you're in custody." Daniel's eyes cut to Kate, sharp, desperate, calculating. "You planned this for 5 years. The courtship, the engagement, all of it. Every smile, every word, every moment." His face twisted, understanding hitting him. "You never loved me." "I never even liked you." "Then why?" "Because the law wouldn't help me 5 years ago. So I became someone the law would listen to. Someone with access. Someone who could gather evidence that couldn't be ignored." She stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear. "You took everything from me, Daniel. My husband, my land, my future. So I took 3 months to take everything from you. Your reputation, your freedom, your empire." She stepped back, raised her voice so the congregation could hear. "And I did it wearing a wedding dress. So you'd know, right before they put you in chains, that I chose this moment specifically, because I wanted your wedding day to be the day your whole world ended." The congregation gasped, some in horror, some in admiration. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "You're going to regret this." "No," Kate said quietly. "You are." Marshal Wade grabbed Daniel's arm. "Enough talk. Turn around." But Daniel wasn't done. He yanked free, turned to the crowd. This woman is a fraud. She's lying. I've done nothing wrong. I'm a pillar of this community. I built half this town. Tell that to my husband," Kate said. "Your husband was a fool who got himself killed. By the man you paid, Cobb. Your letter said the Brennan matter is handled. You paid him $2,500. Daniel's expression flickered, just for a second. Trapped. "I don't know anyone named—" "I have the letter," Kate interrupted. She pulled a folded paper from inside her bouquet. "Your handwriting, your signature, payment notation in your ledger dated 2 days after my husband's murder." She held it up for the congregation to see. "This is a copy. The original is with Marshall Wade, along with 16 other pieces of evidence showing a pattern of murder and land theft spanning 10 years. The congregation was murmuring now, loud, angry, turning on him. Daniel saw it, saw everything he'd built crumbling, saw his reputation burning, saw his freedom slipping away, and he snapped. His hand went to his coat, inside pocket, where he kept a derringer. "Gun!" Marshall Wade shouted. Everything happened at once. Daniel's hand emerged holding the small pistol. The marshals drew their weapons. Kate dropped flat behind the altar. Gunfire cracked through the church, deafening, echoing off stone walls. 3 shots, 4, 5. Women screamed. Men dove for cover. Children cried. Smoke filled the air, acrid, choking. When it cleared, Daniel was on the ground, hit in the shoulder, blood spreading across his white shirt, his gun 3 feet away on the floor, the marshals standing over him, weapons still drawn, and Kate was on her knees behind the altar, her white dress stained with dust and powder smoke, her ears ringing from the gunfire, but alive, unhurt, victorious. Marshal Wade moved to cuff Daniel, but before he could, the back doors of the church exploded inward. Not a figure of speech, actually exploded. Wood splintering, shattering, flying in all directions. 5 men burst through, all armed, all firing. Daniel's ranch hands, coming to rescue their boss. Marshal Wade went down immediately, hit in the leg. The other 2 marshals returned fire. The church became a war zone. Bullets tearing through pews, splintering wood, shattering windows, people screaming, running, diving for any cover they could find. Kate stayed low behind the altar, her heart pounding. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. She'd expected Daniel to resist, maybe try to run, but not this, not an armed assault in a church full of civilians. One of Daniel's men, a thick-shouldered brute named Dutch, who'd worked the ranch for 10 years, grabbed Daniel under the arms, started dragging him toward the broken doors, toward freedom. "No!" Kate shouted. She didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. The fallen marshal's revolver lay 3 feet away. She grabbed it. Heavy, unfamiliar, but loaded. She stood, aimed at Dutch's legs, fired. The recoil nearly knocked her backward. The shot went wide, hit the wall behind him. But it got his attention. Dutch dropped Daniel, turned, saw her. His eyes widened. Recognition. "You!" His gun came up. Kate dove behind a pew as his bullet splintered the wood where her head had been a second before. She scrambled on hands and knees, the heavy dress tangling around her legs, slowing her down. Boots pounded behind her, close, getting closer. She reached the end of the pew, rolled out, came up on one knee, fired twice. One shot missed completely. The other caught Dutch in the arm. He cursed, stumbled back, blood spreading across his sleeve. But 2 more of Daniel's men were flanking her now, coming from both sides, trapping her. Kate ran toward the side door, the only exit not blocked, out into the afternoon sun. The street was chaos, people running, screaming, horses spooked and pulling wagons, children separated from parents. Pure panic. She heard boots behind her, pounding, heavy. A hand grabbed her shoulder, spun her around. She swung the revolver like a club, connected with the man's jaw. He dropped, but another was already there. Bigger, faster. He tackled her. They hit the ground hard. The gun flew from her hand, skidded across the dirt street, out of reach. The man was on top of her, heavy, reeking of sweat and gunpowder. His hands went for her throat. Kate's hands scrabbled across the ground. Found something. A rock, smooth from the river, heavy enough. She swung it. Connected with his temple, hard. He grunted. His grip loosened. She shoved him off, rolled, reached for the gun. A boot came down on her wrist, hard. Pain shot up her arm. She cried out, looked up. Dutch stood over her, blood running down his arm from where she'd shot him. His face twisted with rage, vengeance. "You shot me," he said. His voice was almost conversational, like he was commenting on the weather. "You're helping a murderer escape," Kate replied. "I'm helping my boss. Your boss killed my husband. Your husband should have sold when Mr. Garrett made his offer, would have lived a lot longer." He cocked his revolver, aimed it at her head. "But you won't make that mistake." Kate closed her eyes. After everything, after 5 years of planning, after getting so close, this was how it ended, shot in the street, by a ranch hand, before Daniel even faced trial. Then, gunfire, but not from Dutch's gun, from behind him. Dutch's eyes went wide. He stumbled forward, fell, landed face down in the dirt, not moving. Kate scrambled back, looked up. A man stood there, older, gray beard, weathered face, wearing a town marshal's badge, smoking revolver in his hand. "You all right, ma'am?" Kate couldn't speak, just nodded. The marshal offered his hand, pulled her to her feet. "Name's Rollins, town marshal. Heard the shooting at the church. Figured I'd better see what Daniel Garrett was up to now." He looked at Dutch's body, then at Kate. "You're Thomas Brennan's widow?" "Yes. I remember when he died. Always thought that case closed too fast, too convenient. It was murder. I believe you." He gestured toward the church. More gunfire echoed from inside, but slowing now, sporadic. "Sounds like the Federals got things under control." Kate looked. The federal marshals were emerging from the church. Daniel in custody again, really cuffed this time, hands behind his back, leg irons, surrounded by armed lawmen. 3 of his men were dead on the church steps. 2 were wounded and surrendering. It was over, finally over.
If you've stayed with me this far, you already know this isn't just about a wedding. It's about what happens when a woman decides the law isn't fast enough and takes justice into her own hands. If you want to see how this ends, hit that subscribe button below, because what comes next is the reckoning Daniel Garrett never saw coming.
Kate walked back to the church slowly, her dress torn, covered in dirt and blood, some hers, some not. Her hair had come completely loose. Her veil was gone, lost somewhere in the chaos. But she was walking, still standing, still breathing. Daniel was being loaded into a prison wagon now. Proper transport, barred windows, locked doors, iron reinforcements. No more rescue attempts. He saw her approaching. His eyes locked on hers, even wounded, even cuffed, even defeated. He still had that arrogance. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is. I have lawyers, money, influence across 3 territories. I'll be out within—" "No," Kate interrupted. "You won't, because every person in that church heard you confess. They heard you say my husband got himself killed. They saw you draw on federal marshals. They watched your men try to murder lawmen in a church full of families." She stepped closer. "You're done, Daniel. Your reputation is destroyed. Your men are dead or arrested. Your empire is being seized by federal order, and everyone in this town knows exactly what you are." His jaw clenched. "You think you've won? I know I have. You'll never be accepted here. They'll remember you lied, deceived, manipulated. They'll remember I brought down a murderer, that I had the courage to stand up to the most powerful man in the territory, that I risked everything for justice." She smiled, not cruel, just certain. "History won't remember you as a cattle baron, Daniel. It'll remember you as the man who got outsmarted by a widow in a wedding dress." The wagon door slammed shut. Locked. The driver cracked the reins. The horses pulled forward, and Daniel Garrett, the richest man in 3 counties, was taken away in chains. Kate stood in the street, watching until the wagon disappeared over the ridge, until she couldn't see it anymore, until it was truly, finally gone. Marshal Rollins walked up beside her, offered her a canteen. She drank. Water never tasted better. "Hell of a wedding, ma'am." She almost laughed. Would have, if she wasn't so exhausted. "Not quite what I planned." "You planned the arrest, not the shootout." "No, I hoped it would be clean." "Nothing's ever clean when powerful men fall." He looked at the church, at the broken doors, the bullet holes in the walls, the blood on the steps. "This'll be talked about for a long time." "Good. Let them talk. Let them know what Daniel Garrett really was, what he did to my husband and all the others." Rollins nodded slowly. "Your husband, Thomas, I met him once. A good man, honest, didn't deserve what happened. No, he didn't. But he'd be proud of you, what you did here." Kate's throat tightened. She hadn't let herself think about that, about what Thomas would think, about whether he'd approve of the lies, the manipulation, the years spent planning revenge instead of moving forward. "I hope so," she said quietly. Rollins tipped his hat. "For what it's worth, ma'am, justice was done here today. However it happened, it was done." He walked away, left her standing alone. And slowly, one by one, people emerged from their hiding places, from behind wagons, from inside buildings, from under porches. Some looked at her with fear, some with awe, some with something like gratitude. An older woman approached, Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house, her face pale, shaken. "Miss Miller, or Miss Brennan, I don't know what to—" "It's all right, Mrs. Henderson." "Is it true? Everything you said about Mr. Garrett?" "Yes." The woman's hand went to her mouth. "My lord, and we all believed he was such a good man. That's what he wanted you to believe." Another person approached, then another. A man whose brother had sold his land to Daniel 5 years ago and left town suddenly. A woman whose husband had died in a riding accident after refusing to sell. A young couple who'd been driven off their homestead by Indians that looked suspiciously like Daniel's ranch hands. They all had stories, all had suspicions, all had been too afraid to speak. Until now, until Kate had proven it was possible to stand up, to fight back, to win. 2 weeks later. The trial was fast by territorial standards. 6 days from start to verdict. Federal prosecutor laid out the evidence Kate had gathered. 17 documents, 12 witness testimonies, and the letter from Cobb, the one that said the Brennan matter is handled. Written proof of murder for hire. Daniel's lawyer tried everything, argued the evidence was obtained illegally, argued Kate had manipulated and entrapped his client, argued that Daniel's confession in the church had been made under duress. The judge, a federal appointee from outside Wyoming, shut him down on every point. The defendant drew a weapon in a church, fired on federal marshals, attempted to escape custody with the aid of armed accomplices. His actions speak louder than any confession. The jury, 12 men who didn't owe Daniel Garrett anything, deliberated for 2 hours, came back with their verdict. Guilty on all counts: murder, conspiracy, fraud, illegal land acquisition, attempted murder of federal officers. The judge didn't hesitate. Daniel Garrett, you are hereby sentenced to 30 years in the federal penitentiary. No possibility of parole. Your assets are to be seized and liquidated, with proceeds going to restitution for your victims. He banged his gavel. This court is adjourned. Kate sat in the gallery, watching, as the marshals led Daniel away, as the courtroom emptied, as justice, real justice, was finally legally served. She'd testified on the 3rd day, told her story, the whole story, from Thomas's murder to her 5-year search to the wedding day confrontation. The prosecutor had asked, "Why did you wait? Why not go to the authorities immediately with the evidence you'd gathered?" "Because I did go to the authorities 5 years ago," she'd replied, "and they told me there was nothing they could do. The local sheriff worked for Daniel. The local judge owed him favors. I needed federal jurisdiction. And to get that, I needed ironclad evidence. So I got close, gained access, and documented everything so thoroughly that even bought officials couldn't ignore it. And the wedding? Maximum witnesses, maximum public exposure. I wanted everyone to see, to know. So there could be no cover-up, no quiet dismissal, no making this disappear." The prosecutor had nodded. No further questions. Now it was done, really done. Kate walked out of the courthouse, into the afternoon sun. The town square was crowded. People had gathered to hear the verdict. When they saw her, they started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder, stronger, an ovation. For the widow who'd brought down an empire. Kate didn't know how to feel about it. She hadn't done this for glory, for recognition. She'd done it for Thomas, for justice, for closure. But she nodded, acknowledged them, and walked to her horse. It was time to go home. 1 month later. Kate stood on the ridge overlooking the Green River, the same ridge where she and Thomas had stood 10 years ago when they'd first bought the land. Before Daniel, before the murder, before everything fell apart. The land was hers again, all of it, 800 acres. The federal court had voided Daniel's acquisition, returned it to her, every acre, every fence line, every water right. She'd spent the past month rebuilding. The house had been torn down years ago, so she'd built a new one, smaller, simpler, but solid, with strong walls and a good roof and windows that caught the morning sun just right. She'd hired 2 ranch hands, good men, honest, recommended by Marshal Rawlins. Men who didn't ask questions about the past and worked hard for fair wages. She'd bought cattle with money from Daniel's seized assets. The judge had awarded her compensation. $50,000 for the land, for Thomas's death. For 5 years of suffering, it didn't bring Thomas back, but it gave her a future. A real one. She stood on the ridge as the sun set, painting the mountains gold and purple and red, the same colors she'd seen the night Thomas proposed, the night they'd stood here and planned their life together. She'd never have that life, never have the children they'd talked about, never grow old with the man she'd loved. But she had this, the land, the truth, the knowledge that Thomas's death had been avenged, that Daniel Garrett would spend the rest of his life in prison, that justice, however long it took, had finally come. She heard hoofbeats behind her, turned. Marshal Rollins rode up, dismounted, stood beside her, looking out over the valley. "Beautiful land," he said. "It is. Your husband had good taste." He did. Rollins was quiet for a moment, then pulled an envelope from his coat. "Thought you'd want to know. Daniel Garrett was transferred to the Territorial Prison this morning. Maximum security wing, a cell next to a man named Cobb." Kate's eyebrows rose. "The man who killed Thomas?" "Same one, serving 25 years for murder for hire in 3 separate cases. Seems he talked too much in too many saloons. Got arrested 8 months ago in Montana. Does Daniel know? He does now. Guards said he went pale when they told him who his neighbor was." "Good." Rollins smiled slightly. "Cobb asked to speak with you, actually. Sent a letter through his lawyer." He handed her the envelope. Kate opened it, read, simple handwriting, direct. "Mrs. Brennan, I was hired to kill your husband. I did it for money, no other reason. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, he didn't suffer. It was quick, and I'm paying for it now. So is the man who paid me. That's something. Cobb." Kate folded the letter, tucked it into her pocket. "Are you going to write back?" Rollins asked. "No." "Fair enough." He handed her another envelope. "This one's from the territorial governor. Official pardon for any questionable methods you used during your investigation. The deception, the stolen documents, all of it. Why? Because what you did exposed corruption across 3 counties. Your evidence helped us identify 2 other land speculators using similar methods. We've opened 5 new murder investigations, recovered land for 12 families." He smiled. "You did more for justice in Wyoming than most lawmen do in a lifetime." Kate took the pardon. Read it. Official seal, governor's signature, complete immunity. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You earned it." Rollins mounted his horse. "One more thing. The town council met yesterday. They want to rename the church. Call it Brennan Memorial Church, in honor of your husband and what you did to bring his killer to justice." Kate's throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Let his name mean something. Let people remember." She nodded. "Yes." Rollins tipped his hat. "Good luck, Miss Brennan. I hope you find peace out here." "I think I already have." He rode away, and Kate stood there on her land, in the place she and Thomas had dreamed of building, alone, but free. The past settled, the future hers. She'd burned the wedding dress the day after the arrest. White fabric turned to ash, a ceremony she'd never complete, a life she'd never have. But in its place, truth, justice, land that belonged to her, a name that would be remembered. and the certainty that 5 years of patience had been worth it. Kate turned from the ridge, walked back toward her house, toward the cattle waiting in the valley, toward the fences that needed mending, toward the life she'd reclaimed, one step at a time. The sun set behind her, painting the sky in colors Thomas had loved, and somewhere she hoped he was watching, knowing she'd kept her promise, knowing his death had been avenged, knowing the land would stay in the family, their family, even if it was just her now. That was enough, more than enough. Kate Brennan walked into her house, closed the door, and started the next chapter, the one where she stopped being a widow seeking revenge and became a woman building a future, on her own terms, on her own land, free.